Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today for this exclusive webinar where we will be discussing how to enhance the casino's hosts as well as host managers' effectiveness. We are honored to have special guest John Fernandez from Downstream Casino presenting with us today as well. John Fernandez has over 30 years of casino marketing experience. He has held key casino marketing positions in Las Vegas, Atlantic City, Reno, Tahoe, California, and Aruba. His major strengths are in marketing and player development. He grew up in Las Vegas and began his casino career as a dealer and worked his way up to various high-level executive positions with top casino companies. He has unsurpassed sales, marketing, and management experience, as well as strong financial acumen and bottom-line orientation. John is currently the Director of Player Development and Casino Analyst for Downstream Casino Resort. Today's session will be led by our very own VisExplorer's VP of Business Development, Jeffrey Haas. Jeffrey has a long track record of working with some of the biggest names in gaming and hotels, including Promise Corporation, Embassy Suites, and Hampton Inns, Harrah's Entertainment, and Caesars Entertainment. Previously, he held the position of Corporate Vice President of Sales and Corporate Vice President of National Casino Marketing for over 22 branch offices and 250 independent agents, generating close to $500 million in sales. His focus is working with VisExplorer's customers on creation of tools and capabilities to assist with day-to-day operations and improve business needs via technology. We will offer a very thorough Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so please make sure to send over your questions by typing them into the question box you see in the dialog box, should be in your top right. We will answer the questions accordingly, and if you would like to schedule a demo after the webinar, please contact us directly at info@visexplorer.com. Hope everyone enjoys the presentation today, and I really thank everyone for your time. I know everyone's busy, and I hope you all enjoy. Jeffrey, the show is yours.
Hey, thanks, Derek. So pretty much what we're going to do for today is, as we kind of already done, we've introduced John Fernandez, who is the Director of Player Development for Downstream Casino. The webinar was going to flow as we're going to have about 30 to 35 minutes of kind of the process, the journey of technology to kind of optimize player development. And then we want to spend a little bit more time toward the end to be able to have those discussions, any kind of Q&As that you might want to ask specifically to myself or to John on the implementation process, kind of where they're at today. As some of you might be either where John was at a year and a half ago or where John is at today. But the goal is to kind of just talk about how one casino, in particular Downstream Casino, has used technology to kind of improve their player development situation. So I think some of the biggest challenges that is facing player development today is kind of the old school versus new school mentality. The old school approach was having this host who had a Rolodex, black book of information. It was pretty much in their head or in their pocket. And as that host went from property to property, so did those guests. So it's critical today to be able to arm the hosts with new technology, one, to kind of not only improve the engagement with those customers today as they're being bombarded with tons of information and messaging, but also how do you take that information that's currently is available to you today and arm it to the hosts to be able to have them to make more impactful decisions while they're working for you. And in some cases, how do you retain that information that is being kept or that is being used by those hosts, so that if there were turnover, how do you continue to keep that information in-house so that you're not losing customers' trips or altogether to to some competitive mindsets. So what we're going to talk about today is that there's this big balance, right? So how do we take the old school approach where you don't want technology to be driving all of the customer engagement, but how do we take that old school approach and mirror it and marry it with kind of some new technology? So part of this journey is I'm going to turn it over to John, but John started his position in January of 2014 at Downstream Casino, and even during the interview process, quickly realized of what their customers or what their host was missing. And so, John, I want to bring you into the conversation. Can you describe to me or to the audience of your time back in January of 2014 when you first took over the position? What you saw when you arrived?
The hosts were basically just it was basically the complaint department for every other department in the casino. I mean, they would get called over because a customer spilled a drink on a customer in the slot department. A customer didn't like the way the beds were made in the hotel, and that was basically their whole day. They had no, they'd never had a casino like this in the area. It was all new to them. When they started, they didn't even know what a host job was. There was the description they had of the host job was something they had copied out of Harrah's. That even said the host take care of our 7-star customers. And I looked, I go, how could you take? And they really had no direction. They were just here, and everybody thought if you have any issue in the casino, call a host. And that was basically what they did. There was 188 hosted customers that were coded between 6 hosts, and that's all.
So can you talk a little bit about your background and what you're in some of your previous lives? I know that we kind of crossed paths, but can you talk about your previous lives and what you've had before?
Sure. Well, right before here, I was at Thunder Valley. I was a director of player development at Thunder Valley for a short time. Before that, I was in Tahoe for about almost 4 years at Harrah's Tahoe. I was regional national director of casino of I had all the reps. So I had national casino marketing up in Tahoe. Before that, I was in Reno for several years, and I was at Grand Sierra. I had Asian marketing, and I had national casino marketing there also. And before that, I grew up in Las Vegas and had I had a lot of properties. I had international marketing when I was younger, and I had Latin American marketing, and I also owned my own business for 10 years. So I grew up in Las Vegas, been in the business almost all of my entire life.
And so you were exposed to a contact management tool before coming to Downstream, correct?
Yeah, all the way back from the beginning. So yeah, I have seen several different systems.
Okay. So currently today, how many hosts? You said you had 6 hosts.
We have 6 hosts now.
And how many positions do you have at Downstream?
We have 1,100 employees right now.
No, but how many gaming spots? How many tables? How many slots?
Oh, okay. We have 2,000 slots, and we have 38 table games here.
Okay. And hotel rooms?
Hotel rooms, we have 374.
Okay. All right. So can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you saw when you first started at Downstream?
Sure.
Go ahead.
We really didn't have. We had one of the hosts that knew Patron a little bit better than the rest of them, and she was able to. She could pull a list, to try to help the other guys. We really didn't even have an analysis department, but one of our hosts was pretty skilled, and she could pull a list. And of course, they didn't really know exactly what they were looking for, so they really didn't have much of a direction. She would try to pull a list and try to help them out, and they didn't have a lot of customers coded. They only looked at ADT, and they didn't look at worth at all. So they only looked at customers with a 300 ADT, and they never. We have a lot of high frequency, low ADT customers that were losing. Had customers losing 160,000, but with a very low ADT, so they weren't even talking to those customers. So there was close to 700 customers that had lost over 15,000 here that weren't even being talked to. And we started looking at this, and that's when we started realizing we're missing a lot of business. So in a year we went from 188 hosted customers to today I can look at my Visit Explorer and see we have 1,815 customers that are coded and that should have been coded to and hosted by our team.
Okay. How were the hosts getting information, or were they getting any information, or how was the process being delivered from marketing to sales?
They had no clue. They had no clue of their production, or they knew that they dealt with the same 20 customers that we had several really big customers, and those are the ones they were talking to. The rest of them, they had no clue of who they should be going after or who our best customers were. And now we have a ranking systems for them. We know who they're talking to. It's totally different in a short period of time.
Okay. And so, kind of what we've generalized here is that, and even then you saw that benchmarks were hard to establish, mainly just because they didn't know what they were doing. I think that, one of the things I hear in conversations with you, there was no sales process, right? They were kind of rudderless, like they would come in every day.
They were not salespeople at all. They were basically just order takers. Customer would call in, but there was no sales training or no sales process ever. They were just a hospitality host.
Right. And then the one thing that I kept on hearing, and I think I heard you mention this earlier too, is that from a metric standpoint, they were guessing. I mean, how would they go about making offers or comp decisions, or can you talk about that process?
They had, if we talked about reinvestment, and they had no clue of how invested we were in a customer, and there wasn't really a good way of looking that up, other than what's in Patron, but it wasn't. Let's just say it wasn't very good. There was no really good way of doing it. So
okay.
Some people were way over comped, and we had some people that were way under comped that should have been better taken care of.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us, and again, I think one of the things that we see, and I guess this is going out to the audience as well, is that in order to kind of you take all those missing pieces, and where we really kind of begin to see an opportunity is through a contact management tool. And this is where we start talking about how casinos, specifically player development teams, can begin to optimize their customer interaction or their customer engagement through their known VIPs, and in some cases even their unknown, through this customer relationship overview. So when you're solely focused on customer satisfaction, you need to have all three aspects, both the sales side of casino hosts, the service side of casino hosting, and then what the marketing department is currently doing today. And then on the outer core, through all of this is empirical data that kind of shows how the hosts are performing, how the marketing offers are performing, how the customers are performing, and then you're constantly revising that information, but you're also still collecting information on these customers as well, right. Whether it's the number of contacts that are being made, the number of offers that are being extended, the frequency of these customers. But really what this contact management tool does is put a little bit more transparency on what the hosts are doing, and to aggregate all that information about the customers in one centralized area, so that it gives them the tools and capabilities to be able to do their jobs better. And that's really what we're going to kind of focus on today, is how do we start where John was at almost 16 months ago, and really kind of where he's at today. So we're going to talk about the 4 phases for improving customer service. And so what we believe the first phase is where you go in and you need to identify what kind of application could be out there to kind of improve with what you're doing. So you need to look for resources, and internally as well. What's your IT infrastructure? What does that look like? What's their bandwidth? And John, we're going to talk a little bit more about what your infrastructure look like. What's the budgeting? What's the timing? But to be able to kind of give everybody the opportunity to be able to really kind of go out there and identify what applications are out there. The second item is the design. So once you kind of figure out what you're going to go work with, what does the design of the tool look like? Is there an organizational structure? Is there some incentive? Is it improving the customer experience? What are the business rules and flows of how all that works? Then the implementation process. And we're going to talk a little bit about the crawl, walk, run, fly rule, and making sure that the data is coming across correctly, the training that takes place once the tool is implemented, and then the adoption is, to us, is the most critical piece of this. And then once you implement and that training process is out there, training just doesn't stop with the technology. We're going to talk a little bit about what John has done to kind of have that continuous improvement process, and so that you can now be able to, as you begin to walk and run, now you can begin to fly. Derek, is this our first question that we want to ask? Derek? All right, I guess not. So the first phase, and John, I guess from this, can you talk a little bit about what you did once you realized you got started? And I think you even mentioned in your interview that you wanted to engage with a CRM tool. Can you talk about how you went about to identify the tools to kind of get where you're at?
Sure. I actually started when I was at Thunder Valley. You know, they've been open 10 years, and they didn't have a CRM system. You know, and I came from Harrah's and Caesars, which, you know, we had Salesforce. But when I got to Thunder Valley, they had nothing. And, you know, we had, I think when I was there, we had 10, and they've had as many as, they go from 10 to 17 hosts. But they had no CRM system at all. So I started interviewing different people. I had the people from Microsoft Dynamics come out. I interviewed Salesforce. I probably went through like eight different people that I interviewed for a system. So I had already started looking at things there, and then I left there. I got this job, and it worked out great for me. This is my wife's hometown, and I had an offer to come here, so it was just great for me to be able to come here and be near my wife's family. So so I already had interviewed a lot of people and talked to a lot of people. I knew kind of what I wanted, and that's where I met Chris Corpy, I think, and he called me, and we started talking about it, and then the more I talked to you guys and the Viz Explorer team, the more I realized that they actually knew what I was talking about when I talked about ADT or when I talked about reinvestment. The things that I was talking about, it was much different than talking to Microsoft Dynamics or to Salesforce or anybody else that I had interviewed. You guys actually knew the casino part, and I would give you an idea. I would say I'd like to do this, and you guys, your team would come back and say, well, did you think about adding this to it? How about if it could do this? And it was just great right from the beginning because I didn't have to explain everything that I was talking about. And I did that with probably the other 8 people that I had talked to. You know, they all wanted to do it, but they didn't understand what I was looking for. And when I started talking to you and your team, you knew, you all came from the same background that I had, and you knew more of what I was wanting.
Was there something specifically, you know, we talk about, you mentioned Salesforce. So Salesforce is in the cloud. From a tribal standpoint, can you talk about some difficulties with that?
Sure, and I had a lot of meetings with TGA here, which is Tribal Gaming Agency or Authority, and anything that was in the cloud, there was no way that that they were going to let us have that. And I think that was the same at Thunder Valley. That was another big issue when I talked about, because there's a lot of systems out there that are in the cloud, and with tribal gaming, we can't have anything in the cloud. So they had told me, you need to find somebody that's not in the cloud, and that's another thing that this system was so great for us.
Yeah, and specifically with that, and I'll kind of expand on that, is once information is actually in the cloud, tribal sovereignty is no longer in play. In fact, typically when information is presented in the cloud, tribes most likely will give up their sovereignty for that. And where that presents problems is accessing of information. It's very easy for the government to be able to access information, because instead of going directly to the casinos, all they have to do is go to the providers to be able to request that information, and those providers are under no obligation to contact the owners of the data that is being requested. So typically what you'll see is in regards to customer data, that pretty much has to stay into play from that standpoint. Did you have timelines or other, we talk about mobile applications. Did you look at anything in regards to that?
We did, but I don't. We had looked at some of those, but I didn't think we were quite ready for it. I wanted to start slow, like we talked from the beginning. We have to crawl first, and so we were starting really slow with it. And
okay.
We may do the mobile someday, but not yet.
All right. Okay. So once you kind of identified, and you decided to go with us, but once you identified after that, the next piece is the design phase.
Right.
And from this standpoint, you kind of had some ideas here. So once we had the application kind of identified, what did you feel were some of the key points that was necessary to have within this system?
I wanted a lot of information about preferences, and we created a program. We called it Meet Your Host, where the hosts were actually calling these customers. They didn't know most of them. They knew a very small number of them, and we were asking them to come in. We had a wheel in the office that they spun, and they won anywhere from $100 to $500 in free play for coming in. But while they were there, we had a whole sheet that we created that we got a lot of information. What do they like to drink? What kind of room? What's their hobbies? What sports? We got a lot of information about them during this 30-minute conversation, and it gave the host a chance to meet the player and sit down with them, and what's their anniversary day? What shirt sizes they wear? What should I invite them to? So we were already building this, knowing that someday we'd have the CRM system and we'd be able to put all that into the preference screens. I know when I showed you the form that we created, you put it right into Viz Explorer, and we were able to start uploading all that information. Where now we knew what their days off were, what they did for a living, how many trips they made. We have a ton of information on 1,800 of our best customers right now.
Okay, so in this case, that would be like an aggregation of information as well as the customer experience.
Yes.
What else did let's talk about the business metrics form of this. This is where you begin to you wanted to kind of give them an idea of what the return, what their ROI was, what the reinvestment was.
And we were able to do that. Right now, when you pull up our Viz Explorer, you're able to see a 30-day, a 60-day, a 90-day, and a 365-day reinvestment on each customer. So you can bring them up, and we've looked at some customers, and wow, we haven't really, we're way under invested in them, and they've lost a huge amount of money, and we could take them out and buy them a big gift. We bought one customer a $15,000 tractor for their farm, and so it really helps to make those decisions, because you're able to see where some of them were way over invested and we've had to cut back on, and it's getting everybody into that 21 to 29% reinvestment.
So when you were talking about the 30, 60, 90, and the 1 year, was that readily available in their systems today?
It is with the one that
No,
we've designed.
but beforehand, they weren't.
Oh
They
no,
have to calculate that on their own, correct?
no, we had nothing like that ever.
Okay, right.
There was never anything like that.
And then from an assignment of task standpoint, I know you mentioned earlier about the host would kind of come in and was somewhat of like rudderless.
Yes.
Was that a key point for you as well, as trying to figure out how to kind of almost hold their hands through that process, or
That's another thing, when they would come in and not have a clue of, what should I be doing today, who should I be calling. They were sitting back waiting for complaint calls instead of saying, wow, I have these 10 customers that it's their birthday today, these 3 customers it's their anniversary, I need to be calling them. This customer, typically they came in 3 times a week and they haven't been in 2 weeks, I need to call this one. Here's another one that hasn't been in a whole month and they usually come in 4 times a month, I need to call that one. They had no way of knowing any of that information. So they were totally lost on who should I be calling today.
okay.
And that's another thing that we were looking for, is for us to be able to assign them those tasks to do. Here's your decliners, and also there was new customers that were coming in. We have customers that come in, it's their first trip, and they didn't know to go talk to those customers also.
All right, so once we kind of designed it, and what we have on here is kind of some other items that you felt were important. One of the things that you really kind of did was you took a look at the organization itself. You wanted to be able to have events and offers, the assignment of the tasks. But one of the key points through this as well is you really wanted to kind of take a look at some reporting capabilities. And can you talk a little bit more about how you feel as though reporting and being able to get to that information in a quick, concise manner, why that was important for you?
I also wanted to see what they're doing. If I assign them, 30 tasks and they have 300 unique calls to make every month, I want to see if if their business is not increasing. I want to be able to take a look and see how many calls they actually made and how many contacts and how many of those converted into a trip. So that's why we have the host manager and the host screen. So we can assign them things, and they're looking at something totally different than what I'm looking at. And I can go in and look at, under host manager, I can see exactly what each of them is doing. And also when they come in, another part of ours, they have a pretty aggressive bonus plan, and they're able to see how close they are every day on hitting their bonus. And it's a 4-tiered bonus program, and they can look and see, well, I need to make another 30 calls this week, or I'm not going to hit my bonus. So now when they come in, first thing they're looking at is how close am I to my bonus, and how many more calls do I need to make, and then they can see their tasks that are assigned to them, and that's really what our goal was.
So you've now given some transparency, not only what the hosts are doing, but now you can also see what the hosts are completing as well. And
sure.
And really from this standpoint, you kind of mentioned a couple things, right? So you've got some benchmark goal performance, so they can kind of see where they stand. And based upon your previous history as well, why is this so critical? Why is this so important to the success of a player development team?
Well, I think that the bonus program and money is a big driver. It's a big motivator. If you have, and it's all laid out for you. It's all if you just follow what we've laid out for you, and if you just do the calls that we tell you, the property's going to do great, and you're going to make great money. So it's all spelled out. You come in every morning and you have, here's who I have to call, and not only that, when you look them up, you've got all their preferences. It's a very warm call when you can call them up and say, well, I see it's your anniversary, your 30th anniversary today, and that's why I'm calling you. I'd like to invite you down. I've got some free play for you. It's a great tool, and it makes it a very warm call when they're doing their calls, and they're able to see where they stand. How close am I getting? How close am I to making my bonus? And it's I think at the one they call it cascading goals, where they have small goals to reach the big goal, which is what I would like our department to do for the year. If they can all achieve their goals, then our whole department's is going to achieve its goals.
So do you think that so let's just say I'm sure there's people out there today saying, well, I've already got a bonus program, I don't have a contact management tool, everybody still kind of knows what their goals are. What would you say to those individuals?
Well, I've always been a salesman. I mean, I think I've always been in sales, and when you put a goal out there in sales, uh, and you see that you're reaching that goal, and it keeps driving you. I go, geez, I've got to make, I saw some of these guys on the last quarter, they're staying over and working an extra 3 or 4 hours to make more calls because they were so close that they could make another $9,000 as of their bonus if they just stayed over and drove another 10 trips. So it's really it's a big motivator,
Okay.
to be able to see that, to see where you stand every day. And if you're a true salesperson, that's a great incentive to have out there.
And are you
I
seeing the
know
transition? Are you seeing these transition from like this reactive hosting to a more proactive sales?
it's incredible that the last two hosts that I hired are really are beating my the first four that were already here, and they're way more sales orientated, and now that with the tool and everything there, so it's gotten very competitive in there. The host office has become very competitive.
But it's a good competitive though, correct?
It's very good. We're all a team. We're all in it together, and it's very competitive. It's awesome.
And you're finding that the host that's one thing you always hear too is that, well, I've got hosts out there that struggle with technology, and they peck away at their computers, and this might be a little bit too much for them. What would you have to say about that?
The last guy I hired was a shuttle driver here, and he had basically no experience. We had to teach him how to use his iPhone, and he was my biggest producer. Last month he had a over $9,000 bonus.
Okay.
It's amazing, and he's on Business Explorer. He's talking to me about reinvestment, and it's just crazy to watch them grow. With having this tool, it's and they're very comfortable. Now I'm starting to get emails from them saying, could we add this to it? And it's like you said, like you're going to talk about now. We started crawling, and then walking, and then running, or running, and then we're flying. And it's very interesting how they come back to me. And and also we can design it. And I wasn't giving them. I've got a lot of metrics in there, and we were only given little pieces of it. And then now as they learn it, we're adding another piece to it each month as they learn it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. That kind of goes to our next slide here, where we talk about the implementation. So once everything was designed, you kind of worked with us. We kind of came out and did the initial training session. What would be some things that you would give to the audience to talk about from the implementation to kind of where you guys are at, or where you see yourself going?
I think the thing that helped the most, because I think it was moving very slow in the beginning. I think what helped the most is having you guys come out and sit with us and spend 2 days with us. Because once you guys came out and we talked, it was great. I mean, we got more ideas in one day with all of us in an office together and putting things up on the board, and here's what we'd like to see, and going back and forth with everybody's ideas. That's what really, I think, got it moving.
Right. So then once that kind of took place, the small improvements we're seeing. The recommendation here is to kind of this crawl, walk, run.
Yes.
And really, and these improvements are really kind of based upon the team itself. So you'd see these small improvements kind of made. This is the whiteboard session that you're talking about. There's the possibility of going to mobile. You don't want to throw too much at them first. But then you can kind of really talk a little bit about your host today, where you kind of feel like they're now walking, and you're starting to see some hosts run. Can you talk a little bit about what your hosts are doing today?
Sure. And I've been in the, I go to the host office every day, and I see them all on it. They're all using it. They're all asking questions. I got an email from one of them today saying, could we add, there's a couple things that she'd like to see added to it. And, and we're constantly talking to the development team, Irina and we'll send her, can we do this? Can we change this? I changed the bonus structure a little bit. I made a few modifications to that, and we were able to do that real quickly. So now we're just kind of giving them a little bit more and making some of the changes. And now they're actually coming to me and saying, I'd like to see a little bit more. And I can give them, as they learn more, we can give them a little bit more of the metrics. I wanted to keep it real simple in the beginning because, it's all new to them. They've never had it. And like I said, I've got one of them that, we gave him his first iPhone, so really had to spend time with training with him. But he's a great sales guy. He can, he's fantastic on the phone. He's got a great personality. He's a great sales guy, but it's just given him the tools, and this was a huge tool for him. And it made him a lot more comfortable when he could look it up and see, where we were in reinvestment, where all of their preferences. You knew a lot about somebody when you gave him a call,
Right.
And it made him a lot more comfortable.
And then and again, you talked about sitting down with us and making some modifications. There's a short-term and long-term approach to this as well too. So there's things that we can make modifications immediately, just small improvements, or we can take a look and say, hey, let's take a look at rolling this out a little bit further. And that's where it kind of gets into, ultimately where we feel as though that where you can make the most immediate impact is going to real time. However, this has got to be a phased approach because you don't want to throw too much at them first just because, to your point, John, it's critical that these hosts begin to adopt and utilize the tool as though if it's their own, that they created it. And having these small improvements and these modifications are so much easier when you start seeing the host buy in. They can really begin to kind of see what really kind of takes place. So,
I think it's a lot better than just giving it to them and saying, here it is, and this is what you got to use. It's a lot better like the way that we set it up, where we started small and now they're asking for more, and they feel like they're having a lot of say in building it.
Right. Okay. So, and now let's talk about the continuous improvement. So, we did training about 3 months ago.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you've done instead of just adding technology to the sales team? But what else have you done to help with that process as well?
We do a lot of training. We had Michael Paulus from your company came out and spent a couple of days with us, and he's totally awesome. He's a young guy. He knows the business. He did a great job for us. Last week we had Nick Ippolito come out, and he spent a whole week individually with each host on telemarketing. Telemarketing, you have to learn how to do that. Not everybody knows how to sell over the phone. So Nick spent a whole week with them last week. We do a lot of courses, on sales, and so we do a lot of training here. But last week was the best. He did a seminar, and then he spent a day with each of the hosts and making calls and actually using the system with them. So that was that. So we do 1 or 2 webinars a month on sales and training.
And have you had any turnover as a result of this?
No, we've had no turnover. We've been able to add more hosts as we found. We found a lot of customers that were worthy of being hosted and weren't. So that's what allowed me to hire more hosts from when I started.
Yeah, and John, I don't want to point this out to the audience. You're kind of an exception to the rule. Typically, when we see technology added to it, and when you start putting out benchmarks and considerations out there of performance, there are some people that just they cannot make the transition from a proactive host to a sales, and so consideration must be given to those individuals to have a better understanding of, obviously they're good employees, but to really kind of make that transition, you might need to take a look at the sales team that's out there and decide either I need to put this into a more customer-facing position, but to your point where you've gone out and found the shuttle driver, it's really understanding of finding the hunters versus gatherers.
Right, and I've got a couple on the team now that that probably should be just hospitality host.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And, at some point, but at least this gives them it gives them all the tools that they need to succeed or fail.
Right.
They can't come to me and say, well, I didn't succeed because I was too busy, taking care of complaint calls, or I was too busy doing this, or I was no, there's no I've given them every tool that they need to be successful.
Right.
If they can't sell and they can't do the job, then maybe they should just be a hospitality host and just deal with the complaints.
And then you've already mentioned this a couple times, but that you've already modified some of the benchmarks moving forward, because instead of having your thumb in the air to try to see, well, this is out there, you've got more data to really talk about the growth.
Yes. Some of the things, that our bonus program were based on, I think it was too aggressive, and they really was too hard to hit. So we made some changes on some of that to make it more. I want it to be doable. I want them to have a nice bonus program, and I also want them to be able to hit it. I don't want to make it to where, they don't hit it and everybody says, well, we're not going to make it.
And you kind of already mentioned too that the hosts are already asking for improvements, and you're beginning to really see the adoption really take flight.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
They're on it every day. You can walk in the host office anytime, and they're on it. They're looking at it. It's got everything that they need.
Yeah. So, and really what we're trying to say here, and this is to the audiences out there, is that really using a contact management tool or technology really adds operational insight. In John's case, they've now begun to leverage data to unprecedented insight. Some of the data was already provided, some of it was not provided. He talks about the return on investment, and preferences, and really giving these hosts some additional information, just be able to make their jobs easier. But the data was always there; they just were never able to get it. So the technology allows us again to be able to provide a little bit more insight on what the customers are doing. You can then begin to accelerate marketing offers faster. Taking events that have been in mailers that have been sent out, you can now assign tasks, and the more important ones, you can place a prioritization upon those. But as John spoke about before, is that there was a rudderless approach to the host. They didn't know what they needed to do every day coming in. Now you're working hand in hand with the marketing team to be able to go out there and specifically target those events or offers that can really drive incremental performance to your property. You can now begin to create better engagement with both known and unknown customers. We really haven't talked about the unknown portion of this, but one of the things that technology can do is begin to prompt known, unknown players, that might hot players, and to be able to use the tool itself to create notifications or messaging to the host teams and help them understand while the customers are in play, as well as recently visited. I know in some cases some of that information takes weeks or months to be able to put it in their host hands, but whether it's information, as John mentioned, about putting it on their fingertips, about the anniversaries, about birthdays, about offers, but you're really now creating that engagement with those customers and really allowing the host team to provide a point of differentiation between you and other properties. And you're now giving hosts access to segmented information. It's right there at their fingertips. They're able to slice and dice the information, whether you want to take a look at your best customers from a frequency standpoint, best customers from a loss standpoint, and that information is right there at the fingertips, whereas before it would have taken several days or weeks to be able to request that through planning and analysis. And because of those KPIs and the business metrics that were established by John, it's very easy for them to be able to do it. And now through all of this streamlining of operations, they're able to do now more with less. So as John mentioned before, they had 188 coded customers. Now they're up to over 1,800. And really they begin to see where they were failing in providing service to some customers that they might not have seen before. So we feel as though that this contact management operation tool really does kind of create more opportunities when you're working with your host teams. And not only that, you can expand across it a little bit more. And John, this is, to kind of talk about this, can you talk about how your PBX team is going to be utilizing BizHost?
We're working to develop. We haven't had most of your properties out there have a VIP services, and we didn't have that here. It goes right from PBX, and then we have a host team, but we're missing that department that's in the middle, which would be the VIP services. And so we're setting up one for them, so when a customer calls in, they'll have all those preferences, and they can look and see, wow, we've got Smokey Robinson on June 20th, and that's one of the shows you'd like to see. So they're able to upsell and take care of a lot of things right from VIP services. Right. They can see the events that we have going on. They can see that this customer is a table game player. They're able to see exactly. And I've got a blackjack tournament next month, and they're able to say, "Are you interested in the blackjack tournament? Let me connect you with your host, and he can explain it to you." So, and that's still in the development. We're still working on that for them.
Okay.
And so they're also getting trained on how to use this, and they've been at all of our meetings, and we're just designing it. It's going to be a little bit different than what the hosts look at.
Okay. Yeah. So, John, I'd like to. Is there anything else you want to add before we turn it over to questions and answers?
I think we've covered it all. I think we've pretty much covered it.
Yeah. So I guess Derek, I don't know if any questions have been asked by the participants on this webinar, but we'll kind of open it up from there.
Yeah, we have definitely a good group of questions. Do you see them on your end, Jeff? Or would you like me to send them over to you or ask them?
Okay.
So, Jeff, I will start off with this question, which I think you've answered. Is the HostViz data stored in the cloud?
No, the HostViz data is not stored in the cloud. It's actually, we replicate the data via a separate server and is actually housed in the four walls of Downstream. So at any time the customer has complete control of the data, we don't VPN in directly to a live operating system, but all we're doing is replicating the data off of that storage server onto that storage server, and then we're utilizing that information to create the application itself. So it is not stored in the cloud. It can be, but 99% of the casinos we're working with today has pretty much, for security purposes, has requested it to stay in their four walls.
Great, thank you. This question is from Vivian. Can you track outbound calls and emails through Viz? Does it clear per month, /year, etc.?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, John, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
We can.
Yeah, go ahead.
We can send emails right from it, and it's just when we pull up a customer in the system, it's just we just click on their phone number, and it dials it for you, and it tells me how long the call lasted, and it's all tracked, and we can we can send an email right from it, and we're going to be able to send a text right from it too.
Great, thanks, John. Okay. This question is from Alicia. If a property only has 1% of its players with a high enough ADT, recency, frequency to be assigned a host, how would this product help increase the number of players needing a host?
Well, you would be able to get more trips. Typically, when a customer has a host, you end up getting, and I'm not sure the exact number, but you get more trips from that customer.
So you're already seeing, you're seeing just from this standpoint that that with high frequency and recency, that you're seeing additional trips as a result of some of the contacts, or because you have a high recency frequency market there, correct?
We do. We have a very high frequency, low ADT. But what's happened is my two most recent hosts, we split up 660 customers that had never been hosted before. And those two have the biggest production because those customers had never had a host before. All of a sudden they have a host calling them and inviting them and telling them I've got this event next week, and those two have been my biggest producers. And I think a lot of it had to do with those customers had never been hosted before. Where my other four had customers that were used to getting hosted, but now I've got my last two hosts that I hired. One of them was a guy that was a shuttle driver, and he's had the biggest production increase, but it was customers that weren't normally hosted.
So yeah, so to your point too, John, this is where it's kind of these unknowns. So it's these people that tend to fly underneath the radar that
right.
that you've never seen before. That just a little sense of interaction or engagement from a VIP host. That's where you'll see the opportunity. You're not really going to see opportunity from the ones that are already out there today, but it's an opportunity to grow the ones that you're currently not engaged with.
And I think a lot of the reason is because there's competition. They're going to other properties, and they're not hosted at other properties either. All of a sudden, they get a host calling them here, and we've got a great property, and now they have a host. So I think we're taking away trips to some of our competitors, and that's why the business is growing because we're taking away. Now they have a host, so they go, wow, I have Stu there, so I'm not going to go to Buffalo Run, or I'm not going to go to because I now have a host. So I think that's been important to us. And the host knows about me and knows what I like. So it's actually I think that's why it's been so productive.
And Jeff, to follow up on that question, I have another question here. Can you see if the customers are hosted at other properties?
No, we wouldn't know that unless they told us.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I want to make sure that I answer the question directly. If you are, let's just say you're an enterprise. So if we can, let's just say I'm going to use, let's just say if I work for a company that has multiple casinos, then yes, we'll be able to see if they're coded at another property. But Downstream's their current is really their only property. But they can't see if they're coded at another property just because they don't get that information. But if you're working for a multiple, let's just say an enterprise or a corporation with multiple properties, then yes, you can be able to see it.
And we do ask them on our preference screen, if they play at other casinos and if they have a host. So if they'll give us that, we will have it in there.
Yeah.
John, this question's from Matt for you. John, compare VisExplorer to previous CRMs you have experienced at larger properties. Is it missing anything?
Not that I can see. I think it's way more. It's way easier to customize it to exactly what we wanted than any other system.
And what were some of the other systems you used before?
We use Salesforce, and I've looked at Microsoft Dynamics. I've interviewed and looked at 8 to 10 different systems. Right.
So, and when you talk about ease of use, can you kind of expand on that?
Sure. It's to me it's easy because I had a lot to do with designing it to what worked for us here.
And how about
and the other thing too is we can. The other thing too is we can set it up. I have like 30 different metrics, but if I only wanted to look at 5 different columns, I could set up to that's all I'm looking at, and I can do that with a host where we've got 30 different metrics that we look at, but I can make it to where they're only looking at 4 things that they need right now.
Okay. Did you find that one of the frustrations I constantly hear is that with some of the other providers is that you almost need another admin to be able to run reports and things like that. Have you seen the case where you don't need to add positions to get information out of this?
I think everybody knows how to use it. It's so simple because even if we wanted to, it's you can click and drag. If we wanted all of our customers from Rogers, we could just drag that into the gray box, and it gives you all those customers. It's got so many things that each of the hosts can do themselves. They can look at. It's just so simple to use.
Okay.
You wanted.
And John,
You wanted. Go ahead.
and John, you did say that it's very customizable. I have a question here from Jameson, and he's asking: is it customizable in-house or through a representative of Viz Explorer?
A lot of it we can do ourselves. A lot of it I can change the looks of it ourselves, and if it's something that's not in there, I can add it to it. If it's something that one of the hosts asked me for two things that she'd like to see added onto it that's not in there yet, I can call Irina and their team in New Zealand, and they'll call me back. I called her today. I have a call with them tomorrow, and within a week I'll have it added to it. But a lot of things I can change myself. I can go in there and the way that it looks and the metrics that I don't want them to see or they don't need to see, I can change that. We can do that here instantly.
Okay. Just one more question from Jameson. Does Viz Explorer communicate with the live system, or is this another database to manage? Got a few more.
That's a live system. It's right out with our patron. We use IGT patron, and it's with a live system.
Yeah, so it's not another database to manage. We actually we can interface with your database itself. So we're really taking information. In fact, one of the things we didn't really talk about here as well is we can take information from other sources as well. Hotel, spa. There's capabilities to be able to pull over non-gaming revenue as well, or non-gaming information, and apply it toward these customers. To really kind of give you more of a complete overall view. So it's very easy for us to be able to integrate together. So hey John, I know that we haven't started the mobile application with you yet, correct?
We have not.
Okay. So but we're going to beta the mobile capabilities with this as well, but pretty much everything they see on their desktop, they're going to be able to have at their fingertips. And part of that too is this walk, crawl, run capability. So
right.
I think that was an important part that we really didn't kind of focus on in the design and implementation phase, but that was something that was really important for you to be able to have information at their fingertips while they're walking the floor.
Right.
Yeah.
So we do want to get that.
So John,
we're at the walking stage, I think, right now.
Yeah. So hey, one of the other things too is and I want to talk about this is that we currently have two different phases of this. There's real-time data, and then there's which we just call data feeds. So currently, right now, John, your information is coming over across once a day, correct? So at the end of the business day, you're taking a snapshot. So they're not making any comping decisions or anything like that based upon they do have to go back into Patron if there's play associated with it for that day. But there is real-time components to this as well, and this is part of the run, walk, crawl piece. Right. Is that the real-time component will be implemented, so they'll be able to see customers as they put cards in.
Right.
But you're taking information, so anything from yesterday up to 6 o'clock in the morning today has been downloaded, and you'll probably have that information no later than 7 a.m.
And that works because the customers are calling in for a reservation next week, or they're making a call to get somebody to drive a trip. So it works for all those.
Hey, Jeff, let's just end with a few questions here I have left. First question is from Carter. Do you find that you have to provide less structured programs for the host because of this tool? John?
I think it's pretty structured, but it's pretty laid out. It's pretty laid out for them. It's pretty laid out, and we do a lot of training on it.
Okay, great. And this one's from Adriana, is there any type of system that is not compatible that would require a new data system? Jeff?
That's for you, Jeff.
Is there any kind of system that's not compatible?
Yep.
No, I mean, from a Viz Explorer standpoint, we pretty much interface with any systems out there. I mean, we're currently installed in over close to 350 locations across 5 continents. Everywhere from IGT Patron all the way to Iverson on some of the cruise ships. It's pretty much we're data agnostic is probably the best way to put it. We don't care where the data is coming from, but we've had I don't think we've run across a system yet we've not been able to interface with.
And Kelly, I see that you have some questions about cost. I will have Jeff will be reaching out to you after this. You and a couple other here have some questions about cost. We'll be reaching out to you guys individually concerning those type of questions. If there are any, looks like we have one more. Jeff, we have a question. How many casinos are using our CRM module at this point?
So John was one of our first betas. Actually, John was our first beta. We currently have 3 live working environments right now. We've got 9 that are currently in the pipeline that we're already going through, and by the end of August, we'll have over 20. So it's been a very strong product for us, and it's probably the most requested tool that's out there. We just did a show in Macau for G2E Asia, and that along with our Viz Explorer campaign management tool were probably the 2 most requested ones that were out there, especially given the Macau environment with the decline in revenues that have been seen over the last 11 months. They're really trying to make sure that they're not losing any customer trips. So the tone has changed dramatically from the last time we were there to where we were at today. So we're excited about that. So I think,
okay.
And again, if we didn't get a chance to answer your questions over the webinar, myself or Kelly will respond directly to you. And if you want more information, as Derek mentioned earlier, please feel free to email us at info@VizExplorer. John, if anybody's got any questions for you, can you provide your email address?
Sure, it's jfernandez@downstreamcasino.com.
And they have no problem reaching out to you directly to answer any questions?
No problem.
All right.
No problem at all. However I can help.
And I have recorded this webinar, so if anybody is interested in obtaining that, please email us again at info@vizexplorer.com, and I'll be happy to send that your way. So
right,
I want to thank everyone.
Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you. Good talking to you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.